5. Hannah Davis joins me now from the Federation for American Immigration Reform, fairus.org. Hannah, it's great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So one of the things we're waiting on this morning, probably in the next hour and a half, is the Supreme Court ruling on birthright citizenship. What does FAIR expect to see from the Supreme Court today, especially with regards to 14th Amendment rights?
Well, I believe that what they're voting on is more so the injunctions, whether or not lower court judges are allowed to unilaterally block the commander-in-chief. Currently, I think just in this second term, Trump has seen over 40 injunctions from lower court judges. And so more so than arguing about birthright citizenship, they're going to be focusing on that. I don't anticipate the Supreme Court having a decision specifically on whether or not Trump can reverse birthright citizenship, but more so the injunction component.
We've never seen this many challenges to executive orders before. Just this month, Supreme Court allowed President Trump to deport migrants to third countries, which overturned a lower court ruling. President Trump is suing, I believe, all 15 Maryland federal judges over a pause on deportations. There's a Boston judge who was challenged for rejecting third country deportations. The Supreme Court permitted Donald Trump to end Biden's humanitarian parole and temporary protected status for 1 million immigrants. And the ACLU, of course, involved in many, if not all of these cases over the legal battles. So everything Donald Trump has tried to do to secure our border and get rid of these millions of people who are in the country illegally has gone to court.
Yeah, most of it. Yeah. Even though, despite that, though, the border's still looking good. It's no longer porous. Monthly encounters are down. Releases into the nation are down. I think it was just in May of this year, there were 0 releases into the nation's interior. And if you compare that to last year, in May of 2024, under the Biden administration, there was like 62,000 releases into the interior. So despite the legal challenges the current administration has, with a lot of things surrounding immigration, there has been some impactful change, and we've noticed that at the border.
One of the things we'll talk about more next hour with a former assistant director of the FBI is the terror threat, the national security risk from the thousands of Iranian nationals that were apprehended at the border and the many that got away that we don't even know about, the special interest aliens that pose a national security risk.
Yeah, that's a big issue right now. I mean, under Biden, we saw over 10 million illegal entries. They were released into the nation, and then probably over 2 million to 3 million gotaways. And those are the ones that we're really worried about because, under Biden, they were just releasing you right into the nation with minimal vetting, giving you a court date for years later. And so those that were purposely evading capture are the ones we need to worry about. And a lot of them are suspected to be tied to Hezbollah or some other Middle Eastern terrorist organization. They just arrested someone in Mississippi, actually, that was a suspected terrorist, and they're a known Iranian. And so I think it was last weekend, the big story for immigration was that there were over 11 Iranians arrested. And then just a few hours ago, late yesterday, the Trump administration comes out and says that they've actually arrested 130 this past week. And there's over 600 sitting in ICE detention beds, waiting for removal proceedings. So I think they're taking a very proactive approach to go after these known and suspected Iranian nationals. But no, you're right. I mean, as Tom Homan said, and he's the border czar, we don't know who they are. We don't know when they came in. We don't know what they want to do here. And it's one of the biggest national security risks we've seen as a nation as a whole in a very long time.
Well, Hannah, we saw that after the terror attack in Boulder, a crackdown on visa overstays from the Biden era. So it's critical to make sure that CBP and ICE and the FBI are able to prevent these future attacks by unvetted migrants.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The minimal vetting we've seen for the past 4 years isn't going to fly anymore. It's led us to situations like the Boulder situation, or the Abrego Garcia, the Maryland man who was, wrongfully deported back to El Salvador. And these nationals, these Iranian nationals we're seeing, even the ones that aren't inherently associated with a known terrorist group, a lot of them have drug charges, visa overstays. that kind of thing. So domestic violence rap sheets. So yeah, I mean, the vetting has to happen when we encounter individuals at the border, regardless if they're claiming asylum or they're just trying to come in or sneak in. We have to do some credible fear screenings. And then there needs to be constant updates with these individuals, regardless of what type of visa or pathway they've come into the nation. We need to be putting eyes on them very regularly.
Well, and that's why, Hannah, this Supreme Court ruling this month allowing President Trump to deport illegals to third countries like South Sudan as an example. How is that critical? How is that decision important to expedite deportations and bypass some of these liberal judges?
Yeah, it's paramount. I mean, like we're seeing right now, when we go back to the birthright citizenship thing, these left-leaning judges are inherently against the administration, even if it's to a fault, and so being able to safely deport someone to a safe third country rather than returning them to their country of origin, which they would probably likely do nothing to them once they're there, is a good idea. I do believe that there's been some injunctions surrounding that as well, though, too. So that's probably going to be a fight for the administration.
It's interesting. Obviously, the Trump administration has prioritized arresting the violent illegals first as a priority, but I think there's also been an 800% increase in nonviolent illegals who have also been apprehended. It's a critical point to make because they've committed a crime by coming into the country illegally. So they should also be apprehended. I do believe that the gang members, the drug traffickers, the human traffickers should be prioritized. But there was an interesting pause, a so-called pause on raids of farms and hotels because that industry pushed back on these apprehensions. Does Fair believe this compromises his deportation goals, or is it more of a pragmatic move to balance the country's economic needs, if you believe that line of thought?
Yeah, we at Fair don't believe that just because there's someone who's a non-citizen or an illegal alien working, say, in the hospitality sector or the agriculture sector, that they should just be able to fly under the radar. It's actually not a good thing for illegal alien and essentially servitude labor where they're being paid pennies on the dollars to be the backbone of our economy. I think it was back in 2019, there was a meatpacking plant that was raided and everybody was like, oh no, what are we going to do? Meat's going to go up. What are we going to do? No one's going to fill these jobs. The next day, there was like a dozen American citizens that wanted those jobs. So if we start paying people a livable wage when it comes to those specific sectors of the industry, Americans will take them. That's been a trope for so long that, Americans won't go into fields or Americans don't want to work in hotels. And it's just not true, And so this indentured servitude, essentially, that illegal aliens are getting paid so little to take up and American jobs and, like I said, be a backbone to the economy. That flying under the radar is not okay. And it's something you see a lot in the immigration debate where, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, people get very squishy about that topic. And so, yeah, you're right. The administration. Go ahead.
Even among Republicans who are pushing to stay out of that economic sector.
Yes. And I mean, that's why the current administration is kind of walking back what they said. They said something at first and they're like, hey, we're going to leave them. We're going to go after them. Now we're going to leave them be. Okay, maybe we'll go after them again. It's a delicate situation. And it is because of the economic factor.
How can we push back against these protests that we're seeing erupt in cities like Los Angeles and kind of counter that narrative from these groups that are pushing back on these important policies?
You mean like the No King's Day protest or more so the anti-ICE protest? Which one?
I mean, I can't keep up with all of the protests, Santa.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I live in the DC area and we're like the protest capital of the nation. So, but LA is, you can't hold a candle to them. So these anti-ICE protests, I mean, I think a lot of them are angry. I think a lot of them feel justified in their opinions and they have a right to protest peacefully, of course. But it's just, I mean, it's the end result of sanctuary policies. I mean, if you really want to get to the nitty gritty of it, these sanctuary states and these sanctuary jurisdictions, they block ICE from being able to peacefully and safely intercept illegal aliens in a jail system. And so they have to go and do raids and sweeps, and the optics of that are horrible. People don't like to see it, even if you're pro ICE. No one wants to watch a raid. And so, and with that comes the protest, and with that comes the politicians trying to block ICE and all of that. And it's basically the end result of sanctuary policies. So that's my hot take. I think that if we got rid of sanctuary policies across the board, there'd be less protest, because what are they protesting? Because they're not going to be able to see the raids. They're not going to be able to see the sweeps.
Hannah Davis, Federation for American Immigration Reform, fairus.org. Great to have you on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Also important to get this big, beautiful bill passed to provide more funding and resources for ICE and CBP. Yeah, I know there are problems with spending in the bill, but it does provide the resources that the Trump administration needs to make sure our border remains secure. More on that and the threat of terrorists inside the U.S. next hour with Frank Figliuzzi, former director of the FBI.